Maura conducts physician-led support groups, helping people live healthier, happier lives, free from chronic diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and obesity. And on our podcast, Health and Mora with Dr. Lori Marbus, we bring to you nutrition and lifestyle medicine experts and extraordinary guests to empower and inspire you with their knowledge and stories of plant-based lifestyle so that you can be your healthiest self.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Dr. Lori Marbus, and today I'm really eager for you guys to listen to my next guest, Suzanne Harris. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Morris.
Well, please call me Lori.
Okay.
It was really, we've met before and had a great conversation, but you are actually addressing one of the most difficult things for people to quit, and that really is a pillar of lifestyle medicine. It's regarding stopping smoking. And I'm really excited to talk about it because it's not a resource that, we've talked a lot about on the podcast, but I think it's an important one. And so maybe you could give us a little history about yourself and what led you to building, the Learning to Quit program and the book and everything.
All right, I'd be glad to. I'm a registered nurse, and I used to work for San Francisco General Hospital here in San Francisco. I worked in the adult outpatient medical clinic and the chest clinic. And I should also say I'm a former smoker. But when I was working in those medical settings, I would say even the majority of the people that I saw were smokers, especially in the chest clinic, and they were there for breathing problems, but there were no services for how do you deal with stopping smoking. So I got interested in that and began to develop a program and worked with patients in medical settings. And it was a successful program. It was at that time, many, many more people smoked. So I would get 20 or 30 people in a group. And in the chest clinic, I worked with a physician, Dr. Paul Burnetta, who really liked what I was doing with smokers. One of his areas of focus, he was a fellow at the time, and he was really interested in lung cancer. So when he moved back over to UCSF Medical Center, he invited me to come there and start a center with him. That was in 1999. We called it the Tobacco Education Center, and we started getting patients from UC Medical Center. I think it was maybe 2001, a woman came into the program named Jeannie Fontana, and she was somebody who had a number of smoking related illnesses. She carried an oxygen tank. She had tried multiple times to stop. She'd once gone to a residential program to stop smoking, and she had not been able to stop. And when I first met her, she was very defensive, and I'm searching for the words how best to describe this. She had more than a chip on her shoulder. And she came in the door saying, I know what you're going to say. I'm really tired of you judgmental nurses. You're going to treat me like I'm an idiot, like I don't know that smoking is bad for me. I will not tolerate you wagging your finger in my face about any of this. I mean, that was like how she came in the door.
Wow.
And I said to her, oh, Miss Fontana, I have been waiting for you for a very long time. You are so clearly saying all the things that we absolutely do not want to do in this program. Would you please come and really watch? And if one of those things happen, as soon as you see it happening, let us know right away. You are the perfect candidate for this job. So she was kind of taken aback, but that got her interested in being part of the program, which was, as it is now, a 4-week program. And she really followed the steps. She did everything, and she watched me like a hawk. She was ready to, like, there you go, wagging your finger in my face, right? And she took herself by surprise. By the end of the 4 weeks, she had stopped smoking.
Wow.
And she came to our weekly relapse prevention support group pretty regularly. She did relapse once for a few weeks, but then stopped and didn't smoke again for the rest of her life. when she died, she left us a sizable donation and asked us to use it to, I think her words were, I want this money to be used to help as many people as possible get the treatment and care that I got. So it then became the Fontana Tobacco Treatment Center. And it's thanks to her that we can provide the services that we do, or the group services that we do, free of charge, give people a really wonderful workbook for free, and have continued to give other people the care that she got. So that's kind of a brief history of the institutions that.
That is a really wonderful story, how someone who's obviously asking for help, but at the same time, drawing the line in the sand saying, but you can't be treating me like everyone else because she failed so many times. Where do you feel like your program differs from other programs where she would get that information or feel that way, seeking what makes your program so successful?
Well, we really do emphasize a non-judgmental support. And we try to tailor the program to the people who happen to be in a particular group. We don't bombard people with a lot of medical information because we assume that most people have a lot of it already. Most people already know that smoking can cause lung cancer. They don't need to be told that. So we really try to keep it to information that they may not already have. Another really unique feature of our program is in the second week of the class, a licensed pharmacist comes to the class. And this is somebody who's also a tobacco treatment specialist and presents all the current medications that are available for people who want to use them for stopping smoking. And one of the things that Jeannie found out there, which most people even today don't necessarily know, is that using more than one medication is much better than just using one, which she had never heard of. And that I think was key to one of the keys to her success, that she used both the patch and the Nicotrol inhaler. So she had like long-acting nicotine on board, and then she had something else to use for breakthrough urges. And that was one of the real important features that she hadn't been informed about before she came to our class. So that's another, I think that the pharmacy element is pretty unique. And our pharmacist makes herself available to participants and to participants' providers for any questions around the medications and if there's any contraindications or things like that. Another unique feature, I think, of our program is that we do have the weekly drop-in support group, which is facilitated at this point by myself and my co-facilitator, who is a physician's assistant. So people have access to ongoing medical support, and we can help people make adjustments in their medications as needed. Plus what you and I had talked about earlier briefly, that invaluable support of other people who are addressing the same issue at the same time.
Awesome. So in your first week of your program, what's addressed? What are you saying? Like, what is your approach to get people on board and excited to continue for the 4 weeks?
Well, one of the things that we do is we introduce an understanding of tobacco or nicotine dependence as a chronic relapsing disease. And we make it really clear that even though you might have judgments of yourself, being addicted to cigarettes is not a moral problem. It's no reflection on your character. It doesn't mean you're less intelligent than anybody else, any more than if you have diabetes or asthma or something like that. And we talk about how many people will say it's all in my head as kind of a dismissive thing, right? And acknowledge that, yes, indeed, it's in our head. Nicotine has a profound effect on certain structures in the brain. And it makes it really hard to resist once you become habituated to it. So we also emphasize in the first class and kind of continue it throughout that one of the practices we strongly recommend is being kind to yourself. That anybody who's been a smoker has a little voice in the head that's constantly telling them how they're weak or they're stupid or they shouldn't be doing this. And we talk about how that undermines the potential for success, that it's not something that's going to help them move through the process more quickly. And that it's a practice, that this negative self-talk is pandemic in our culture. It's not just about smoking, but if you're trying to change something and you keep berating yourself, it's going to make it harder, if not impossible. So we talk about that. In terms of medically, one of the things that we talk about is carbon monoxide. Many people know what carbon monoxide is, and that they have carbon monoxide monitors or alarms in their homes, but they're not necessarily aware that one of the big risks of smoking is carbon monoxide. And the more you smoke or the more aggressively you smoke, the greater the level of carbon monoxide. When we met in person, which we don't right now, we still meet on Zoom, we would do a carbon monoxide reading on anybody who wanted it. And a normal carbon monoxide level is 6 parts per million. It's like you and I walking around the city are exposed to carbon monoxide from exhaust and so on and so forth. So it's not abnormal to have some level of carbon monoxide in your blood, but anything above 6 parts per million in a smoker is attributed to the carbon monoxide in smoking. And I've had people who've gone up past 60 parts per million. Wow. And you can imagine how having a load of carbon monoxide means you're getting that much less oxygen, contributes to shortness of breath, it contributes to poor perfusion in the tissues, all the different kinds of things, muscle cramps. And so the first class we would do a carbon monoxide reading. And then after the participant stopped smoking, within a day or more of that, we do it again. And it's a very powerful motivational tool, because somebody's at 30 and then they're down to 5. It's like, whoa, I've made a big difference that I can actually see, right? So that's another thing that we talk about in terms of a medical part of our program.
Wow. And how is that test administered?
There's a little machine, a battery operated machine with a mouthpiece, and you take in a deep breath and then you blow as long and as hard as you can into the machine.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. Oh my goodness, I love this. And I would just like to jump back to the piece to the negative self-talk, because I think what we found is that is, like you said, it's pandemic, even for people who are struggling with their weight or anybody. And we've really been engaging in, reprogramming and understanding positive self-talk, and really focusing in. There's a Dr. Shad Helmstetter who I just interviewed, and he wrote this book called What to Say When You're Talking to Yourself. And it's been fascinating, but I'd love to just, if you dive a little deeper into that, like, what are the common things people tell you that they're saying to themselves if they do share that? And then how do you help them address that? Like, how, it's one thing to be mindful of the issue. It's another to have some type of intervention or, a toolkit to address it. How do you address it?
Well, one of the things that we focus on in each of the 4 weeks is some aspect of motivation, of self-motivation. And in the first week, we talk about the difference between fear-based and desire-based motivation. I could speak for myself that when I was a smoker, I used a lot of fear-based motivation to try to get myself to change. Oh, you're going to make yourself sick. oh, you're a bad mother, you're a terrible nurse, what's wrong with you? You're smoking, you know that's bad for you. I was working on an oncology unit, so I had plenty of opportunities to see some of the risks that I was taking. And I was always in an atmosphere of fear because it was just there all the time. Also afraid of sooner or later I'm going to have to stop, and what's that going to be like? So it's like the donkey and the stick. We use that as a metaphor, right? If you get behind a donkey, and most people have some sense of how this works, you get behind a donkey and you're like hitting it with a stick, trying to get it to go forward. It puts its feet in. It's like going to resist whatever it is you try to make it do. On the other side, desire-based motivation, which is more like the donkey and the carrot, I kind of discovered this for myself when I was stopping. I tried stopping so many times, and I decided to like look at what are the things that I like the least, that are most oppressive to me about smoking. And the two things were what I've just described: being afraid and having low self-esteem, because I'm a nurse and I'm a mother and I'm a smoker, and that just didn't go well. So I thought, well, when I stop, what will happen? Oh, I'll be fearless and I'll be proud. And I knew physically, like, oh God, I feel so bad about myself and I'm scared. And, just like you can bring that into your body, right? And then the contrast of, wow, I'm really proud and strong. So 30 days before my stop date, and when I stopped, there weren't any medications or anything. So it was all whatever I was doing in my mind. I had this little mantra: I'm smoke-free, fearless, and proud. And I wasn't smoke-free yet, but I said it every morning as I was waking up, every night as I went to sleep. I wrote it because I knew that when you write things down, you use both sides of your brain. I wrote it. I had little Post-its all over. And what I experienced on my day that I stopped, and of course the urge to smoke came up, right behind it came those words that I had been telling to myself for 30 days, but carrying with them the medicine of all the kinesthetic information I had been programming into my body. So it was like medicine, right? So we do some exercises we have a list in the workbook where people start to experiment with their motivations, their want-to motivations, and to imagine getting pulled forward by, I'm going to have more money, I'm breathing better, I feel more proud in my family, whatever it might be, really helping people to get clarity. And sometimes it's easier to find what your want-to motivations are by going through what you don't like, which is what my experience had been. But and we encourage people to write their own mantra and begin working with that. And to just also pay more attention to what's the chatter in their minds, because our experience with addiction is like, you really want to do it without thinking about it. You don't want to bring too much awareness to it. But to pay attention, and when you pick up on the inevitable trash talk, turn it around, but also don't punish yourself for it, right? Because everybody has it about something. Everybody is using very ineffective ways of trying to elicit important changes in their life.
So much wisdom here that you just said. And I think the one thing that I see that has worked with, for example, I started this podcast because I wanted to understand how people could lose weight or change dramatically these lifestyles. It seemed like overnight, but I'm sure there was this process of, reprogramming and speaking differently. But the really important thing that I think I hear you say is that you were speaking in like you were already there, right? So you were saying in the present tense, I am here, versus the forward-looking tense of I will or I want. You were like, I am.
Yeah.
And that really changed your belief, so that when you were there and ready on your quit date, you were already believing you were there. And you're just like, yeah, I'm just aligning my habits my actions with my belief of who I am.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 Oh man, that's so powerful. I wish people understood the power of their minds is just so phenomenal.
Truly. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
It's
Well,
amazing.
it's like deep breathing. It's free, and so we don't value it enough in a way.
Exactly. It's funny. My husband's always told me, he goes, I would sigh whenever I was stressed. It was just like a natural thing. I think I
Yeah.
must have carried
Yeah.
from childhood. And he goes, I always know when you're stressed when you're sighing. It's like, then I became, very aware of my own breathing. I was like, you could feel it was my body's way of dealing with tension. So it's been really fascinating. So that's week 1, which is phenomenal. And then week 2, you said you're bringing in the pharmacist and they're understanding that there's medications that can help, which again, I think is very pivotal to understand. There are things to help you get through the tough
Yes,
times. It doesn't mean you're going to be on medications forever. And
exactly.
it's a tool to help you to the next thing. And we're certainly exploring that and potentially embracing all that with, medications and weight loss or medications and whatever. We can't be afraid to engage with where we're at in modern medicine and utilize those tools for a period of time to help you get to the next place. Why not open up a few gates where you don't have to knock down the wall, but we can just open the door, right?
Right. Well, as long as we're speaking about medication, Lori, and I also
Yeah.
want to tell you another motivation thing about the second week, but one of the I don't know, I wouldn't call it a complaint, but I don't have a better word for it right now, that people will express, well, why do you have me using a nicotine patch or nicotine gum? I thought I'm supposed to be getting off nicotine, right? So there's some confusion about that. And I think it's important for people to know that nicotine in cigarettes and vape is dirty. It's got all kinds of other, I mean, even if you have so-called organic cigarettes, which people mistakenly think are better than other ones, they're not. You still have all the tars that are carcinogenic. You have all the things that are naturally in tobacco that once you let some fire to it are toxic, right?
Right.
The medications in the patch and gum and all of that are pharmaceutical grade. They're clean nicotine. They also don't get to your brain as quickly. Inhaling a cigarette or a vape is a much more powerful delivery of the drug. It takes about 5 heartbeats to get from your lips to your brain.
Wow.
So, and that's another reason why it's so addictive. It's like immediate, right?
Wow.
And with the patch, it's got to get through your skin, and it goes into your venous circulation where the inhaled nicotine gets into the arterial circulation. So it's not addictive the way in which cigarettes could be. So if people have a concern about that, they should.
And you're also, working towards, you can ease down. So typically how patches work, you have a step down over a period of time.
Yeah.
And you're getting rid of the hand, this motion, this habit of, holding something, which I'm curious, what do you do to help people, the hand thing? Because I'm sure, like I've had patients who quit smoking, rub rocks, they'll literally rub it, or they have a rubber band around their wrist and they move it, or what do you use to kind of just that habit of doing something to their hand or chewing on something?
Yeah, well, there are lots of things that you can use. For some people, they want to maintain that through the withdrawal period, so they might use the Nicotrol inhaler, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with a Nicotrol inhaler. It's kind of a misnomer because it's not like an asthma inhaler or something like that, but a little mouthpiece that you puff on. And that sometimes helps people who are getting off of the cigarettes. We'll have people cut straws to the size of a cigarette and do deep breathing through the straw. Or flavored toothpicks is another popular option. Tea tree oil or something that kind of wakes up your mouth, that gives your mouth not a bland experience, like the way cigarettes can give you a zing in the mouth. things like that. Also snacks, we encourage people to cut up ahead of time, things like celery or carrots, things like that, that you can eat without having to be concerned about gaining any weight,
Mhm.
things like that.
Gum, I assume some type. There's even nicotine gums. I don't know if those are very
Yeah, the
helpful.
gum, if people are used to chewing gum, we sometimes caution them on the nicotine gum because it's not really gum. And
That's
people
true.
will not read the box and will say, did you read the box? No, I don't read the box. I know how to chew gum. It's like, it's really, again, another misnomer, because with the gum, you want to chew it slowly until you feel a tingling sensation or you start to have the flavor of the gum. Then you stop chewing and you park it between your cheek and your jaw, and it gets
Okay.
absorbed. The nicotine gets absorbed through the tissues in the mouth slowly. But if you just chew it, the nicotine will go to your stomach. It'll be neutralized. It won't give you any relief from the urges. You'll get hiccups and nausea and come and tell us the gum doesn't work, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
And this is where we're talking to you. So this is fantastic. So those are the first few weeks. I want to get back because you mentioned vaping here in a minute, but I just want to go, is there, what is the things in week 3 and 4 that you would feel are important to highlight with your program and make it successful?
Well, there's one thing I still wanted to say about week 2 in
Okay.
terms of the motivational. We go through something that's called the journey of change, and people will be able to see this on in our workbook if they access our site. But it basically is like a map, and it outlines, this is what you can expect with any change. And we'll talk about it in terms of, if you moved to a different town or got married or divorced or got a new job, there's a process that gets initiated between when there is that onset of the end of something and then moving through various stages until you get to the place where you're no longer a smoker who isn't smoking. You're somebody for whom smoking isn't really relevant anymore. So we map that out and give people a good description of each of the different stages in that process, so that they can see also visually the benefit of continuing to move forward. As soon as you move back, you're making the journey longer, right? You're going over a path you've already been on. The shortest distance is to just keep going. And there's certain places that are likely to be more uncomfortable than others. One of them being what we call creative confusion, which is a lot of ups and downs, where you have this sense of confusion because you've always had cigarettes to kind of give structure to your day, what to expect, what you're doing when, what you do with eating, what you do with talking on the phone. That's removed and it's like disorienting, right? It's like confusing. So it's confusing in that way. But it's creative confusion in that you're now being called on to learn new behaviors to deal with things that you used to use cigarettes to deal with. Oh, I'm really angry. I'm not going to have a cigarette. How am I going to process this anger? I'm bored. I'm not going to have a cigarette. What does this boredom mean? So we talk about ways to address those kinds of things that tend to come up during this part of the journey that we call the creative confusion. Ups and downs. Oh, this is easy. Oh, wow, this is really hard. All of that contrasting.
What else in the journey of change is some of the pit stops or things that people should expect?
Well, the beginning is, we have the picture of it is kind of like a canyon. And you're on this ledge, and then you come down, and then you go through the creative confusion, and then you're on the rebuilding side. But in the beginning, you go through something called denial and decline. And something has happened that made you think, I need to stop smoking. But maybe I could just smoke on the weekends. Or what if I just had once a week, or, you're kind of trying to bargain your way back up to the old way. And it's a place where denial stories are really powerful, right? The things that you tell yourself to make it okay to smoke. Well, I don't smoke that much. Well, my grandmother smoked and lived to 104, and all that. So getting familiar with what are the stories that you tell yourself that make it easier for you to hold on to the old behavior, right? And then talking about some ways of letting some of that go. Right after denial and decline is letting go, actually, like, I'm tired of this, I'm just going to go for it, right? You let go, and then you get into the creative confusion. And then at a certain point, there's something that we call illumination, where you're getting it. It's like, it's not over yet, but I can see one urge at a time, right? I'm beginning to see how this works. I can do this. I've got it down. And then at a certain point, you're in a phase of rebuilding. Maybe you're bringing back in things that you let go. I know when I stopped smoking, I had to stop beer and wine. I don't personally have an alcohol problem, but alcohol was a problem for me when I was stopping smoking. So one of the rebuilding things for me was, okay, I'm ready to have a glass of wine, and if it's a problem, I'm going to stop again. But things like that. And then eventually you get up to what we call the new way, which is, as I described before, you're now, smoking isn't relevant to you anymore. You're not having to think about it. And it takes about a year to go from the old way all the way down and through and up to the new way.
So you've really just reshaped your identity in this area of your life.
Yeah.
You're really, it's your journey of identity change. That's fabulous. Where did you get this information about the journey of change? I think that's phenomenal. It can be used in so many places. Curiosity is highly piqued here when you start discussing behavior change.
I suffer from old age, lack of memory, but there was a woman who worked with me on a very much earlier version of our workbook. She was a patient of the physician that I mentioned, Paul Brunetta, and she used to work for NASA. She was like, not a coach, but she was an advisor for NASA. And she taught that to me.
Wow, that is awesome.
She came and she worked with me. She was diagnosed with lung cancer. And she wanted to, and she'd never smoked, but her father had smoked 4 packs of cigarettes. So likely that was, and she wanted to make meaning out of it. So she worked with me she taught me a lot of stuff that was useful. That was one.
Oh, wow. That's phenomenal. Very cool. Okay. That was a wonderful. What about weeks 3 and 4?
Week 3, we go into looking at the neurotransmitters and getting some respect for what it is that you're doing because of how powerful the chemical thing is that's been going on in your brain, right? Week 4, we look at relapse. And we look at it from generally two perspectives. One, from the thought progression, the ways in which a relapse happens long before you pick up whatever the substance it is. That you're kind of thinking, well, for myself, I would say something like, yeah, I'm okay, but if my parents die, I can imagine that I'll have to smoke, right? So I've said it, that's like the beginning, and we go through, I could even tell you, I should have it just in my, the road to cigarettes. We go through all of the different phases that lead you back to smoking, but it basically starts with that vague possibility. And that possibility, if you don't say, nope, not going there, it'll create craving, and that'll create fantasizing, and then eventually you have the cigarette, right? And people in group are really attuned to that, so they can hear it in each other. And I was like, did you hear what you just said? You said you were going to try to trying doesn't do it. It's only doing it that does it, right?
Wow.
So,
Well, that is powerful because that again, addiction, a food addiction, any addiction, this speaks to, where anywhere we are in our lives, it's the decisions and thoughts and actions that led us to it. But you're talking about it's really those thoughts that are setting us up for this in the future, and you're bringing mindfulness to those thoughts that are
right.
setting the domino
Yeah,
into
yeah,
effect, basically. Wow,
yeah.
that's really powerful for people. I feel like that they must leave your program understanding and feeling so empowered and confident of things that they've learned that they just felt they were a victim to an addiction.
Yeah, people do. They learn a lot. The other piece about the relapse that we share with them, which is, I think, another feature that maybe other programs don't have. We talk about the change that happens in the brain when the brain is exposed to nicotine.
Mm,
We do a brief description of neurotransmitters and receptors and what they are. We talk about it in terms of like a lock and a key. And your front door key isn't going to fit my front door key. They're both front door keys, but they only fit in a particular lock. And the neurotransmitters are like that. And that nicotine is very similar in its composition to acetylcholine. So it gets into the brain through the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. And once it's there, those receptors proliferate. And that's part of why when a person who smokes a pack a day wakes up in the morning, the best cigarette is the first one in the day, because those receptors don't have any nicotine in them. And you have the cigarette and it begins to fill up the receptors and say, oh, I'm ready for my day, right?
mm,
And so we talk about how that's a physiologic change that happens, and that part of the healing process is those receptors go back to the normal amount.
mm,
But something that's key for former smokers to know, they never lose the memory of that nicotine. So if I haven't smoked in over 40 years, but if I were to have a cigarette today, it would be nauseous. I'd be nauseous, it'd be disgusting, but by the end of the week, I'd be back up to a pack a day because my brain will never forget. And that's something that some people can say, oh, no, I'll never. I say, you can look at it that way, or you can look at it. You've got a very powerful tool against that voice that comes up in your head that says, oh, you can have just one,
mm.
So we talk
Yeah.
about it from the physical side and the thought process side.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. No, that is very, very important to understand that relapse and understanding that it's not a moral dilemma. It's not, the shame and stuff. Because I know you had mentioned earlier before we started, just uh, people walk into your program or have already tried and they're dealing with probably a heavy load because I'm sure their families are trying to get them to stop, and the guilt and, like you
Yeah.
said, embarrassment and hiding, but helping prepare them for the relapse or the struggles or the challenges. Yeah, because stress doesn't go away. Your triggers aren't going to go away, right?
Right.
Amazing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit also about your book? And then I also want to get into the vaping,
Sure.
as I feel it's an important
Sure.
message. But you
Mhm.
also have a book, so if people want to read the book or maybe give the book to someone who they know is struggling with smoking, or we'll send your website and everything. But can we just talk a little bit about that and
Sure.
why you wrote it?
Well, my co-author is the person. I'm probably not somebody who would typically write a book. I'm not somebody who would typically write a book. And when I was working with Paul at the General, well, let me back up a little bit. There is a patient who you'll see if you see the book or if you go onto our website. Clarence Brown was one of my patients at San Francisco General when I first started working there. And it was a clinic where residents would be responsible for patients, and they're only there for a half a day. So if that patient comes in at another time of the week, the nurse that's assigned to them has to figure out how to take care of that patient. So Clarence Brown was one of those people for me. And he was a little bit of a nightmare patient. He had a lot of illnesses. He was completely non-compliant. He never came in when he had an appointment. He would show up 5 minutes before clinic closed, gasping for breath, demanding to be treated. Wouldn't make any of the changes that could help, right? He used heroin, cocaine, alcohol, and cigarettes to medicate himself through the day. And he had heart disease, he had lung disease, he had osteoporosis from the steroids. I mean, he had a lot going on. And between 84 and 89, we worked on the alcohol and the cocaine and the heroin, and he was clear of those by 89. I said, okay, let's look at the cigarettes. He was really furious. I mean, he would get really very awful with me, but he came to group and then he wouldn't come, and then he sort of dropped in and out. But miracle of miracles, by 91, he had stopped smoking. And within 6 months, it was like a metamorphosis. This incredibly gorgeous human being emerged from behind all of that static. And a very, very powerful speaker, just a beautiful, beautiful human being. And he worked with me as a peer support in the program. And one of the women who had come through the program, an artist who was in the book, Barbara Voss, said, people can't find you. There's no advertisement about this, right? We didn't have a budget really. And she had a friend who was a professional photographer, and he said he would do a portrait of one person for us to make a poster. This was like all pro bono stuff. Did I have somebody that I would want him to take? And I said, yeah, Clarence Brown. Well, John Harding, who was a photographer, was so taken with Clarence and his charisma. He asked me, did I know any other people like this? And I said, well, actually I do. So he and I began this project where he would photograph somebody and I would interview them. And it was a very fun project. It got me going to different parts of San Francisco that I never would have felt free to go into. And by the time I met Paul, I had, I don't know, 5 or 6 portraits and stories to go with them. And I had them Xeroxed and I handed them out to my patients and I showed it to Paul. He said, what are you doing with this? I said, well, I share them with people. No, this is a book. You have to read a book. So that's how the book started. It was Paul's idea.
That is awesome. I feel like stories people can relate. But what a powerful story about Clarence. My goodness.
Yeah, one of the photographs, now I have several of them, but one of the photographs I have of him, in those days we had paper medical records.
Yeah.
And this was his idea. He said, you should take a picture of me with my medical records for 5 years before I stopped smoking and 5 years after, which we did. And it's like the 5 years before, I can't even show them on the screen. I mean, it's phenomenal how much suffering went in. He was intubated 8 times before he ever stopped smoking.
Oh my heavens.
Come to the hospital in an ambulance 12 times a year. I mean, this was, you know, and then 5 years after, it was still a pretty hefty pile, but not even a quarter a size of the one before.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's how the book started.
That's phenomenal.
It's
oh my
Paul's
goodness.
friend.
Well, you were the spark for his idea for the book. So you had done the hard work. So let's dive into vaping, right? Because vaping is kind of, you know, where people are going if they're wanting to quit and they don't think there's any issues, but there actually is. Can you give us a broad sense of what the difficulties and problems are with vaping and what you're seeing from people who are trying to stop?
Well, vaping is unregulated, so it's really unclear what you're getting. You know, there's so many different brands, there's so many different options for vaping. And I know from, there's a lot of research that gets done at UCSF, and they've researched this in the lab and other ways. that a product that says it has no nicotine in it sometimes does. It's just not reliable. And there are also chemicals in vape to give it a taste, to give it, easy and down the throat, and that are carcinogenic. And there's stuff in there that we don't even know about, right? So generally, I'd say my feeling, and I'm not alone with this, is that, yeah, vapes are probably less dangerous than cigarettes, but they're not safe. And on the addictive side of it, what we've seen, which is, it's heartbreaking, because, I've been doing this work for 45, 50 years. So I've seen like what's happened with cigarettes and all the deception and the thousands and thousands of people who've lost their lives. And now to see this vape thing starting, we get young people who call us, and they're in their early 20s, for example. This is a typical person who calls us for help, and they've been vaping since they were in middle school. And it's very possible to vape all day because you can hide it. It's not like it's obvious the way in which you couldn't light up a cigarette in your classroom, but you can go to the bathroom and vape with your friends. And it's very easy to do chronically all day long. So we get people who typically in the tech industry who have high pressure jobs and need to be productive. And they say, I start vaping before I get out of bed in the morning. And I vape all day long. And I can't imagine being able to do my work without it. I've not been able to stop. I've not been able to cut down. Then by the end of the day, I need to do something to come down. So then I start vaping marijuana. So they're trapped. They're trapped.
So, wow. So they're literally, it's a continuous all day long. I do recall some research about popcorn lung, similar effects.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that research? If you could share.
Well, I just remember, and I think that what they determined was that that was from a vape that had certain oils in it, and that was probably from vaping marijuana.
Wow. Okay. So do the people who are vaping and try to enter your program, are they having the same success of quitting? Or are you finding that they relapse more or struggling? Where do you find that they respond?
I would say that we don't really have enough data yet. We don't have enough people. That a lot of what we've been doing is talking to people on the phone, who call in and who want help. We have had, like, through COVID, I remember one young person, he was in high school and he had a very hefty vape habit. And then COVID happened and he wasn't going to school and he didn't have access. And he got really scared because of what he was experiencing. And so he said something to his parents, which is not something that you could rely on with teenagers, right? And his parents sent him to us, and he went through the program and he was successful in stopping. It was hard, but I think a lot of people there's like vaping is on the climb again because people are out and about more, kids are back in school.
Wow. What is the percentage of people who vape? Do you know any of the, like 20% of Americans?
Data, Gloria, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay. Because what is it for smoking? Is it 20% or something around there?
Oh, in the Bay Area, it's more down like 10 to 12%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And across the United States, are you familiar with the smoking statistics there by any chance?
I should be, but I'm not today. Right.
Okay, gotcha. I think from what I last read was like 20%, because it was high as, I'm sure it was much higher after World War II and 50s. We were watching a movie last night and it was set in 1957 and it was just so funny. One of the scenes was they were on an airplane and the passengers just lit up, and I was like, that's just such a bizarre thought to me.
Yeah,
But yeah, and I guess the other thing that with vaping is that it's easy to do anywhere. It's not like,
right,
you have
right,
to go outside, or you don't
yeah.
have that retaining smell, things like
Yeah, and
that.
I think that a lot of people's kids are vaping and the people have no idea.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Mm-mm-mm. It's just like you tackle and start conquering one problem, and another one, it's like it's just the Pandora's box. It's just
Yeah.
never ending. Oh my goodness.
We're working on developing a program at UCSF, in conjunction with adolescent medicine
Mm,
that help, to specifically target young people who want some
you
help.
start vaping.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense as to why people even start vaping? Because it's not like there's, if they're starting vaping straight out instead of cigarette smoking, is it just the cool thing to do,
It's
or
cool to do. We don't think it's a problem.
mm,
You can get hooked. I mean, you just try it and you can get hooked pretty quickly. I know that for me in my day, there was a lot of bonding that went on
mm,
with smoking. And when I think about these kids, these middle school kids getting together in the bathroom, it's like you want to be cool, right? You're walking in and you're saying, oh, here, try this.
mm,
Sure, you're gonna try it.
mm. Wow. It almost seems like you have to do put people through when they're entering school, a pat down and checking everything
Yeah.
and confiscating the vape. Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, this has been a phenomenal conversation, and I really have learned a lot, and I really want to say thank you, one, for joining us on the podcast, but all your work. I mean, I just can't even imagine not only the lives you saved with your work, but just the quality of life that has improved. Like, Clarence is a perfect example of that.
Well, I think that's one of the things, when people realize how many years I've been doing this, aren't you bored? Doesn't it get tiring? No, I mean, for one thing, you get into intimacy right away. People are telling you things that are not superficial, but they're really things that are close to the core, right? Which is, I think, valuable and interesting. And then smoking takes up so much room for most smokers' lives in their daily life that you remove it, change happens. It's not just the smoking goes, other stuff comes in, right? To move into that space. And it's very often stunning and inspiring, right? May I tell you one more story?
Yes,
Just
no,
coming
love
up,
stories, love
Thinking
stories.
about that, there was a man who came to the program, this was years ago, and he worked in IT for the city. He worked for the city of San Francisco. So he was like all over the place dealing with people's computer problems. And then he would come home at the end of the day and sit on his sofa. This was his description: sit on the sofa, drink beer and soda, and eat potato chips and watch TV and smoke. That's like what he did, right? And so he came to group with a number of health issues. And really, he said he didn't want to stop. I think a lot of people say they don't want to stop because they fear they can't, right? But I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. But he did put into practice the things that we were talking about. And he stopped smoking and he became a bear. He was really, grumbly, I hate this, whatever. And I don't know what inspired me to say this. I've never said it to anybody else, and I hadn't said it to anybody before him. I said, do you think you could find a way to make this fun? And he lived down by the beach in San Francisco. And he'd never been to the beach. It was something he was always going to do, but he'd always just been on his sofa with his potato chips and his cigarettes. So he thought, I'll go to the beach. He went to the beach. The beach was amazing. Long story short, within 2 months, he was walking from San Francisco down to Pacifica on the beach, back and forth, these long, long walks. He started to feel better. And he decided to start exploring California. He started going to parks. He was like seeing things he'd never seen before. So he got a camera and began taking pictures, beautiful pictures. He would come and he would have like 500 pictures to show me in a slideshow. Beautiful, beautiful pictures. He transformed into this hiker, right? Hiker photographer from the couch potato, right? Never could have predicted that.
Wow.
Never could have
Wow.
predicted
I mean, this is, I agree. Your work and my work is very similar. And I consider it the antidote to burnout is when you really can see true healing transformations occur.
Yeah,
I called it because, of course, I'm pushing a whole food plant-based diet is one of my things. I tell people, I was like, listen, I have a veggie crack addiction. I'm going to have you eat more vegetables. You get better, and then I get to see you better. And so we get this dopamine cycle going. And so we just need to keep that going, please. I need you to be my veggie dealer. So it's really fun. So it's they crack up over that. And it's just a different way of patients. I don't think, right now with our current healthcare system, we're such a sick care system, right? And we just,
yeah,
it's
good
an
point.
unfortunate thing, right? We don't focus on the health, and patients don't know anything. They just know that they go to the doctor, they get more prescriptions or an intervention and shoot out the door with, oh, go lose weight, but never, or
Right.
go stop smoking, but they don't give them the tools and the resources for many reasons. It's not necessarily the doc's fault, but yeah, so this is wonderful. I can't wait to send people your way, and I'm hoping that you'll have many more success stories.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for this time, Lori. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that video. Before you go though, please hit the subscribe and alert buttons so you don't miss out on any of the amazing content we're working so hard to provide you. We upload a new episode of Health and More with Dr. Lori Marbas every Friday. Now, if you'd rather listen to the podcast, you can find us on all the major platforms such as iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and even Spotify. If you're looking for amazing resources to help you start and sustain a plant-based diet, exercise, recipes, or anything wellness, we got you covered there too. Because at Mora, we actually provide physician-led support groups to help people live happier, healthier lives free of metabolic disease. Don't forget to check out our website at mora.com, and thanks again for watching.